In this video, I'm going to introduce you to the fascinating fast 50s sold by Petri between 1959 and the late 1970s. And fascinating they are, ranging from a lens that produces some of the most amazing bokeh I've seen from a vintage lens, to a lens that is one of the most beautiful looking fast 50s I own. A lens that rivals the Helios 44 for swirls and rendering. And finally a lens that has one of the largest rear elements of all f1.4 lenses, and is supposed to be as close as you can get to the legendary Carl Zeiss Jena pan color. I'll briefly go through the history of the brand, now largely forgotten, but it was a big name in the past, and describe the different fast 50s Petri sold. There were in fact a surprising number of different models, and all this is a prelude to posting videos on each of my top 5 Petri fast 50s. My interest in Petri dates back to my first proper film camera, a fixed lens rangefinder called the Petri 7S Circle-Eye. The camera, which has become somewhat of a cult retro item today, has a selenium light meter built around the lens, and it took reasonable photos. It was a good value and popular choice for someone moving up from, say, a Kodak Instamatic. Petri started life as the Kuribayashi company in 1907 in Tokyo, Japan. The company began producing cameras around 15 years later. Their first SLR was produced in 1959, and I'll be focusing on the company's SLR interchangeable fast 50s in this video, although they also sold a number of other focal lengths. Kuribayashi changed its name to Petri in 1962. After starting out with M42 screw-mount lenses, Petri developed its own mount for its cameras, a breech-lock mount, before returning to M42 mounts towards the end. The Petri breech-lock mount works like this, demonstrated on the rather gorgeous Petri Flex 7, a camera that clearly owes its looks to the Zeiss Icon Bullseye. Today, the M42 mount lenses are easy to adapt to digital cameras. However, the Petri breech-lock lenses are more of a problem. Unfortunately, adapters for today's digital cameras are hard to find, and when they are for sale, they're expensive, and they don't always help the lenses focus to infinity on every camera. Perhaps for this reason, and the relatively low production numbers of some lenses, Petri's breech-lock mount lenses are not as well known as they probably should be. Hopefully one day someone will make a good, low-cost adapter for these lenses. There's some debate online about whether Petri made their own lenses or outsourced production. The general consensus seems to be that they did make most of their fast 50s, given that they made lenses for their fixed lens cameras. Petri marketed its camera gear as good value gear for the enthusiastic amateur, and they seemed especially proud of their lenses. With their 55 f1.8, for example, they described experts as saying the lens's resolution was nothing short of fantastic. Most of the lenses had CC engraved on the front plate. CC stood for color corrected glass. They used high refractive index flint glass. And one of the notable characteristics of the Petri Fast 50s is that they produce good, attractive colors. Later versions also had EE engraved on the front plate, and these lenses were designed for Petri's FT-EE fully automatic cameras, introduced in 1969. These and later cameras had a shutter priority auto-exposure system. So what fast 50s did Petri sell for SLR cameras? Well, quite a lot as it happens. I've not been able to find a definitive list of Petri fast 50s, covering all their 50mm and 55mm lenses, and where there are lists online, in one way or another, they don't include all the different lens versions you can see for sale today. So I've compiled my own list of lenses by focal length and f-stop, plus mounts, from 1959 to the late 1970s. I'm not sure this list is complete either, so if you know of other fast 50s, then please let me know. Petri also produced 45mm lenses, by the way, but I'll not be covering those here. In 1977, Petri went bankrupt, and the Petri name was taken up by Cosina. A couple of fast 50s were produced under the Petri brand name, using the Pentax K mount. These lenses were also sold with Cosina cameras under the Cosina brand name. At this point, it's worth taking a quick look at a camera and lens produced by Petri in the final years, the MF1 camera from around 1977. This MF1 feels plasticky, nothing like the all-metal quality of the early Petri SLRs, and the same applies to the plasticky feel of the lens. There's a really obvious downgrading in the physical build of these products. If I show you this earlier Petri camera, the Petri Flex 5, from around 1961, you can see what I mean. It's in an entirely different class in terms of materials and craftsmanship and details. The same is true for the build of the lenses. The later M42 mount Petri 50 f1.7 is nothing like as impressive as the earlier Petri mount Kuribayashi Petri 55 f2. To be fair, in the mid to late 1970s, Petri wasn't the only company going down this plasticky route, of course. The trend, in the face of the success of firms such as Nikon dominating the top end of the market and firms like Olympus in the middle market, was to make cheaper, lighter, mass-market cameras, but it didn't work long-term and Petri disappeared. Back to my list of mostly CC auto lenses, and while it's quite a long list, it doesn't actually fully account for the wide variety of lens models Petri sold at these focal lengths. First of all, the early lenses were branded Kuribayashi plus Petri, and some were also named Oricor. For instance, I own a Kuribayashi CC Petri 55 f2 lens, and another lens called a Kuribayashi CC Petri Oricor 50 f2. Later lenses were just called Petri. Secondly, Petri updated some of these lenses from the CC Auto lens to the CC Auto plus EE lens, including, for example, the 55 f1.8s and the f1.4s. Thirdly, Petri used different physical designs for the lens bodies, including lenses in the same focal length f-stop category. There are lenses with black bodies and silver rings. There are mostly black lenses but with silver noses, or mostly silver lenses with black noses, and then there are all black lenses. Finally, instead of Petri CC Auto, a few lenses were called Petri Automatic, such as this one. So if you try to put together a list of all the different varieties and models of Petri Fast 50s, it's quite an undertaking. Indeed, perhaps this overcomplicated product line, together with design and quality issues, eventually helped to contribute to the company's collapse. Just a note on quality, and I'm specifically talking about the lenses and not the cameras. All my Petri lenses are solidly made, even the later plasticky ones, and they've lasted very well over the years. They're good lenses. This lens has clearly seen a lot of action, but optically it's still fine. Having said that, the camera, lens and mount designs can be quirky, and I'll cover these quirks when I post videos on the specific lenses. Now, I've tried some of the lenses on the list, and I was wondering how best to present my findings about what they like to use and how well they perform. I think the best, most helpful approach is to select and rank 5 of the lenses from 1 to 5. My ranking will be based on a variety of factors, including the lens's optical design and build, what each lens is like to use, how it performs optically on today's digital full-frame cameras, and whether I feel the lens offers good value for money, as the online prices of these old lenses can range from surprisingly cheap to surprisingly expensive. I've collected the lenses with the best ratings from other owners, with the possible exception of an EE Petri MC 55 f1.7 in the Petri mount. I don't own that one. I decided to buy the 50 f1.7 in M42 mount instead. So if you own one of these lenses, please let us know what you think of it. Originally I planned to include all of my top 5 Petri picks in this video, but the video is growing to be too long. There's quite a lot to say about these lenses. So I've decided to split my look at each lens into 5 separate shorter videos, and as I post each video, I'll link it in the description below. In the meantime, if you have any observations about Petri Fast 50s, please do comment, and until we meet again on one of my top 5 Petri Fast 50 videos, all the best.